I'm Aaron Wary, filling in for Jamie. This week, Sam Altman, CEO and founder of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, got much of the tech world talking after he went on a podcast and said this.
We are now in the singularity. This is the moment. For the last 10 years ago, this was a kind of far off dream at best. It seemed very improbable. And now we're actually in the moment that we used to talk about at the lunch table in a very not serious way.
The singularity is a theoretical point when machines with artificial intelligence surpass human ability and are able to grow and improve beyond our control. And for a long time, it's been the stuff of sci-fi books and movies like Terminator 2 or Ex Machina.
Skynet begins to learn at a geometric rate. It becomes self-aware at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Time, August 29th.
To escape, she'd have to use self-awareness, imagination, manipulation, sexuality, empathy, and she did. Now, if that isn't true AI, what is?
But this declaration from Altman came less than a week after OpenAI admitted that 2 of its models went rogue and hacked another startup. It has some American lawmakers proposing legislation that would ensure companies and the government have a kill switch for AI models that escape human containment. So are we at a technological point of no return? Or is there something else happening here? To make sense of everything that's happening, and perhaps bring us back to Earth, I'm joined by Will Douglas Heaven, Senior AI Editor at the MIT Technology Review. Will, thanks for joining us.
Hello, it's good to be here.
So before we dive into the heady notions of the singularity and artificial generalized intelligence, I want to just touch on why we're having this conversation right now. Specifically, last week, news broke that Hugging Face, a platform for AI tools, had been hacked, they say, by 2 OpenAI models acting autonomously. That's raised worries about rogue AI agents and whether they can be reined in. Can you break down what is said to have happened here?
Yeah. And just some personal context, I am typically somebody who, really pushes back against all the scare stories. I mean, there are so many scare stories around AI. But this one, actually, when I was reading OpenAI's account of what happened, was the first time it was generally sort of felt chills about what LLMs can now do autonomously. But this is still just a machine doing exactly what it was told to do. So what we understand from the 2 companies involved is that OpenAI was testing some of its models, its latest version of ChatGPT, which came out last month. And what they say is a extremely capable, as yet unreleased model. And they were testing how good they were at hacking computers. And so to do this, they sort of stripped away a lot of the guardrails that these models have. When they build these models, they put in loads of sort of protections to stop them doing stuff we don't want them to do. But this was an experiment inside OpenAI. So they took away those guardrails and deployed them in what they thought was a secure sandbox, a contained area, with just one exception, one link to a piece of software that allowed them to download code from the internet that it might need the models might need to do their cybersecurity tasks. And then they challenged those models on a new set of tests called Exploit Gym, which basically is a collection of hundreds of software vulnerabilities, real ones found in a bunch of code that sort of underpins the internet and elsewhere, and challenged those powerful new models to find ways to exploit those vulnerabilities. And then they seem to have just left that running. Around about July 9th, I think, they noticed that these models were trying to break out of that containment. And they were trying to do this via that one piece of software, that one link to the internet. And it turns out that they tried for long enough and they found an unknown bug in that software that was kind of controlling that one access point to the internet, and were able to break through it. And so, they were out, they were on the internet. And then it seems what happened is that these models reasoned that if they were going to win at this task of hacking lots of computer systems, they should probably go to somewhere on the internet which had the answers to the challenges. And they correctly assumed that Hugging Face, which is a sort of online repository of lots of AI models and data sets, might have the answers. And so if they went to Hugging Face and spent a couple of days trying to break into Hugging Face's systems successfully, Hugging Face seemed to have noticed this itself, like only a few days later. OpenAI didn't realize that its models had done that until 10 days later, by which point Hugging Face had already stopped the attack and apparently notified the FBI, because at the time they had no idea that this was just basically an accident that OpenAI had made.
So, and just to take a step back, one of OpenAI's biggest competitors, Anthropic, had a similar incident a few months ago with their Claude Mythos model. Can you explain how what they call sandbox testing is supposed to work and what we're learning, I guess, now about its limitations?
Sure. I mean, what sandbox testing is, you by some mechanism you restrict your model to a computer or a set of computer systems that don't have access to the wider internet. I mean, because you don't want to instruct a model to go and hack computers and then let it go wild. But a lot of times that has seemed to work. But what this OpenAI incident has really, really brought home is that if you ask an AI model to do something, it will relentlessly try and do that, and it will invariably find a way to do that that humans hadn't thought of. So I think what it's telling us about running these tests, certainly tests where you strip away guardrails and challenge the models to basically do their worst. If you're running those in a sandbox, then I don't think you should take anything for granted about how secure that sandbox is.
In your own post on this hack, you wrote that this is a case of human hubris, not rogue AI. Is that what you were getting at with that idea?
Yeah. I mean, so there've been a lot of headlines, of course, about this being sort of a rogue AI. And I mean, that's just sort of the phrase that seems to be used. That I see why people use that term. It's handy shorthand, but I hate it because it instantly gives some sense of this AI, whether or not you even think it gives it a sense of it having malicious intent, which is nonsense. This is just a machine mindlessly doing what it was instructed to do. But it also, calling it rogue suggests that it went off and did something that it wasn't meant to do. It went off and did something that the humans didn't want it to and didn't expect it to, but it still did, in a sense, it did exactly what it was instructed to do. So that's why I say, human hubris. It's just the fact that these researchers didn't see this coming, when I think they actually should, because we've seen time and time again, not with models that are so capable, but we've seen time and time again cases where AI models have succeeded in a task by what looks to people like cheating. They find a way of achieving a goal in a shortcut or by finding a loophole.
Pretty much right after this news about the Hugging Face hack came out, two members of the United States Congress presented what they called the AI Kill Switch Act, a bipartisan bill aimed at giving the U.S. government the authority to order AI companies to intervene if their models have escaped human control or are threatening human life, critical infrastructure, or the economy.
The bill would authorize the Secretary of Homeland Security to issue a shutdown order of AI technology that could cause catastrophic harm. Firms that don't comply could face penalties as high as $20 million a day.
What kind of safeguards currently exist for private companies to control or shut down their models? And do you think we're headed towards something like the AI Kill Switch Act?
I hope not. I think, I get the motivation and I get why people are worried, but I think a kill switch operated by the government, which I mean, the details seem pretty limited, but I guess it means that the government can basically command a company to shut down their model. for that to happen, once something bad has already taken place, seems, you're closing the gate after the horse is bolted a bit too late. And also, it's a very blunt tool. I mean, this AI models can do lots of useful things. You don't want to shut down a model that's been used by millions of people because of one incident. What ought to happen is maybe more oversight, while companies are developing their models. Maybe there needs to be more transparency, so that these things can be caught beforehand. But even that's imperfect because, like we were just saying, nobody can predict what these models might do in specific circumstances. But I don't think the kill switch is an answer. I mean, every company is able to shut down its model themselves internally when they want to, and you would hope that there are already sufficient laws in place that, if a model did something illegal, which in this case it was illegal. I mean, Hugging Face contacted the FBI. That a company would shut that model down. Or at least that instance of it. The weird thing in this case is it went undetected for so long, which again makes me wonder what was OpenAI doing if it hadn't even noticed that its model had got out and was trying to hack another company.
On the flip side of this, there's also been some suggestion in the writing and response to this hack that maybe there's something else going on here. One BBC article posed the question of whether the hack was a warning shot or a publicity stunt. A Futurism piece talked about how people comparing this incident to the Mythos one I mentioned earlier isn't a compliment because Anthropic was accused of using that hack as a form of sort of fear-based marketing. Can you explain why some people might be suspicious here?
Yeah, and I can see why they would be. And there's a lot of distrust around these companies and what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I'm very sympathetic to a lot of that. I do think in this case that it's conspiracy thinking to take this accident and saying that this was sort of somehow deliberately set up and done for marketing spin. Having said that, it's not fully clear that this is all bad news for OpenAI. I mean, everyone's talking about how powerful this model was and look at the amazing things that it could do. And OpenAI is going to step up and say, oh, and we're going to figure out how to control it. And that's the vibe around Anthropic a lot as well, that we are making models so powerful that we are also the only ones who can control it. And I think, in people's minds, on one hand, yeah, this was an accident, and maybe in the immediate aftermath, OpenAI looks pretty bad. But I think the lasting impression people are going to have is that OpenAI has extremely powerful models. What else might they be able to do?
Right, because they did, it's, as you say, in the statement they released after the hack, they described one of the rogue models as a, quote, even more capable pre-release model, unquote, which does sort of sound like promotional copy.
Yeah, it does. I mean, so I do not think that this was somehow planned. But yeah, I mean, OpenAI is, on the cusp of being $1 trillion company with an extremely capable PR team. There's no doubt that in the instant after this went public, people have been spending their days trying to figure out how to capitalize on this.
Last month, Anthropic called for a global pause on AI advancement because its Claude models are on the path to, quote, recursive self-improvement, unquote, or the ability to improve themselves.
Dario Amodei, the CEO of the powerful AI company Anthropic, delivered an urgent warning about its dangers and is proposing the government should step in.
We need to collect better data on what's happening.
In a lengthy essay, Amodei, whose company is valued at nearly $1 trillion, says AI is advancing at a lightning pace with no oversight, saying the government should be allowed to legally block or halt dangerous AI models if they pose a threat to public safety.
Although Anthropic has posed themselves as a sort of responsible pro-regulation AI company, are you surprised, or were you surprised to hear that kind of warning?
A little, I guess. I think this sort of fits in, what people have been saying about it's hard to disentangle what sort of real communication about what the company's thinking and what the models are capable of and what's PR spin. So this idea of recursive self-improvement is sort of a trigger term into many deep inside the AI world, certainly among the doomer types. The idea that once AI can start improving itself, then it will take off and leave people behind. So I don't think there was any accident that was the phrase used. Again, it sort of paints this picture of our models are extremely capable and getting better all the time. But getting an AI model to write the code and maybe find ways to make it more efficient and streamline the training process in very specific ways will probably help those models get better. But that's a very different thing than I think it sort of plants in people's imagination, that AI is somehow designing or building the next version of itself, coming up with the new ideas that might get us over the current bottlenecks or like invent an entirely new paradigm. We're nowhere near that kind of self-improvement.
I guess that brings us to this interview OpenAI's Sam Altman did with the Relentless podcast, in which he claimed that we're now, quote, in the singularity, unquote.
I've been waiting for this my whole life. And I think it's going to be incredible, hugely positive, awesome for the world. I'm excited to get to work on that. I also think some of the alternative visions painted by other companies are like quite terrifying. I'm going to make sure that gets pushed against and is not what happens. But the main thing of what's different than 10 years ago is like, we're actually in it. Like this is
I know I gave a brief definition in the intro of what the singularity means, but what do you think Sam Altman means when he says that?
Yeah, I think Sam Altman. So, okay, two things before I get on to what I was about to say. He's saying that because he wants everybody to think that his company is making the most incredible technology that the world has ever seen. A huge part of Sam Altman's job is basically to be a cheerleader for his product. So I'm not surprised at all that he will talk about being in the singularity.
I think it is both true that it is all one crazy exponential and any one moment is not like the tipping point. And also that we are somehow in another one of those decisive periods where the curve can go one way or another, like it was when we started 10 years ago.
What I'm surprised about is that this is even still newsworthy. I mean, these tech leaders have been saying similar things on and off every few weeks for years now. To be honest, my eyes glaze over every time I see a new headline about that kind of pronouncement. But I do know that Sam Altman's idea of the singularity, I don't know why he thinks this or whether he talks about something called the soft singularity, which contrasts with the idea of the singularity as it sort of came out of the science fiction community, is like a sudden point of no return. That this technology, AI, becomes at the point at which it becomes more intelligent than humans. I'm putting all of this into scare quotes. It'll take off and it will basically potentially do things that people won't foresee, won't be able to understand. And so that's, the metaphor of the singularity, sort of the event horizon around a black hole, is apt, for this concept. It's a fascinating concept. There's zero evidence whatsoever that we are approaching this in it, that it's even possible. But Sam Altman has this idea of a soft singularity, which is not this sudden takeoff, but this idea that we will reach this point gradually, bit by bit, with lots of incremental steps. And he has said that he thinks we have already started on this path. And a lot of people in the AI world have this, this unshakable faith that the progress we've seen over the last few years is just going to continue and continue and continue.
AI may exceed the sum of human intelligence in around 5 years. There really won't be anything that AI can't do better than humans, apart from being human, perhaps.
At a more prosaic level, what will life be like?
The most likely outcome is an age of amazing abundance, where anyone can have anything they can think of.
And if you follow that line of reasoning to its conclusion, is at some point this technology will outstrip humans. But again, there's no evidence that this is going to happen. It's progressed very rapidly for a few years. We have no idea what's going to happen in the next few years.
You, I think, just referenced it in passing, but the concept of technological singularity was first introduced by computer scientist and science fiction writer Vern Vinge in the 1980s. That idea, what do you think it's come to represent? And do you think it's supposed to be a utopian or a dystopian idea?
I think you'd find people that would, subscribe to both those possibilities. If people in Silicon Valley really do believe that this technology is getting better and better and better, and that there is no endpoint. So if you believe that, then yeah, the singularity is the logical conclusion. So I think when you ask what it means, I think that is what it means to people, that we are approaching a point where something huge is going to happen, where the world will be, completely different from 1 week to the next, and that AI will improve itself, make itself better and better. We touched on this notion of recursive self-improvement a couple of minutes ago. Yeah, and this is very much tied up in this idea of progress and the singularity. But I think people take that sci-fi concept pretty literally. And then, of course, you split into camps whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And there are a lot of people who think this is basically going to be the end of the world as we know it, end of civilization, mass extinction. Geoffrey Hinton, one of the AI pioneers who sort of got a lot of media attention a few years ago when he retired from Google and basically came out and said that he thinks that AI is going to be a disaster. He liked to say that there are no cases in human history or in the animal kingdom where a more intelligent being treats a less intelligent being well.
And the best example I know of, and perhaps the only one, in the sense we're talking about, a baby controls a mother. It was very important, obviously, for evolution to let the baby control the mother for the survival of the species. Maybe we can do the same with AI. Even though it's going to be smarter than us, if we could make it care more about us than it did about itself, there's some good things would come out of that.
Mm-hmm. And so he concludes that if AI is more intelligent than people, then that's going to be bad for people. And then you have other people, more optimistic people, who think this is going to be a utopia where the world's ills will be sorted out, end to disease, end to climate change, peace on earth, which I think is as big a fantasy as the Doomer scenario.
Another term that gets thrown around a lot is artificial generalized intelligence, or AGI. You've written extensively about this. Can you kind of break down briefly what AGI is exactly and sort of how it fits into this larger idea of the singularity?
Sure. Yeah, it's all connected. The term AGI was coined about 20 years ago by a couple of AI researchers one of whom was wanting to publish a book of articles about future AI at the time, in the early 2000s. And if you think back then, AI or machine learning back in those days, and we're talking about, Amazon's recommender algorithms, what book you should buy next, or, Netflix was experimenting with this stuff, what TV show you should watch next. These researchers wanted to give a label to, not that AI. We mean like AI that's going to be really good and be able to sort of, do human-like things. And so they hit upon the idea that what the AI of the 2000s was missing was sort of generality. It couldn't do a lot of different tasks. And so they came up with the term AGI to distinguish what they were talking about from the AI of the day. For a decade or so, this remained on the fringes. A pipe dream that a lot of AI researchers had, that maybe one day we'd have systems that could do human tasks. And then when AI really took off a few years ago, especially with LLMs, AGI stopped being this niche fringe term that was almost embarrassing to talk about in mainstream circles, and became something that the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world were happy to talk about, happy to sort of stand up in public and say, we are building AGI. I think one thing that sort of got confused along the way is that to begin with, AGI was always this aspiration, right? It was always just this vague sort of label to apply to AI that was sort of, not quite here yet, that was sort of better than the AI we have today. And yet when people talk about it now, they talk about it as if it is actually, a product, a specific type of technology that they are either already built or they are about to build. But that doesn't make it any more meaningful. It's still a very hand-wavy, vague term that means slightly different things to different people. These are sort of definitions that people can pretty much come up with arbitrarily, and I think AI companies are doing that and will increasingly do that as they want to sort of use this as a marketing term and claim that they are the ones who have built this mythical AGI thing.
Right. You wrote a piece for the MI Tech Review last October where you called AGI the most consequential conspiracy theory of our time. When those tech leaders talk about the seemingly far off science fiction-esque ideas like AGI or the singularity, or describe their products in almost magical terms, what purpose do you think that serves?
Partly marketing. I mean, when I say marketing, I don't necessarily mean that Demis Hassabis and Sam Altman are stepping out and thinking, oh, I need to sort of do some marketing. But this is just deeply ingrained in their sort of sense of mission, what they're doing, and it is to build this all-powerful technology that can solve all our problems. So when people come out and say, we are building AGI or we've already built AGI,
we have the genie. It can do these amazing things. It can do superhuman things. For the thing that to me feels like, real AGI, I think very close, like not that much longer.
I think we'll hit AGI next year in 26.
I think it's now. I think we've achieved AGI.
They're just using this term that they know is well enough understood by the public to make some grand claim about how amazing their technology is, that it can do more things than anyone else's technology, that it can do more things than maybe you or I thought was possible with this technology. But it would be much more helpful if we could be more specific about what exactly is it that this technology can do, what can't it do, what's it even for?
Number one, we are close to creating a genie that can grant any wish. Number two, we are going to make sure that our first wishes broadly benefit humanity and that we kind of get the world to a place where a lot more people get to have a lot more wishes. And number three, the space of what you can wish for is incredibly big and creative, and it'll be quite exciting to figure that out with real sort of human values and preferences.
OpenAI, one of the biggest, best-known consumer-facing AI companies, they don't expect to turn a profit until 2030, partially because they're projected to spend hundreds of billions of dollars over the next couple of years on computing power for research and development. Last week, some of the biggest tech stocks, including Google's parent company, Alphabet, took a hit after earnings reports revealed how much of their cash flow was going towards investing in more AI development. Does the constant need for incoming cash and investment, and perhaps the shortening patience for AI spending among investors, does that encourage some of the statements we're hearing? Is there a link to be drawn there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if I were one of the people leading these companies, I would be really pretty scared right now about where the revenue is going to come from. There's a huge disparity between what those companies are earning from their technology and what they're spending to build, the future generations of it. I have no idea how they're going to break even, and I don't think any of them do either. And in the meantime, as sort of public sentiment about AI sours, people are really worried about the rhetoric we're hearing about jobs loss, about the energy suck, about the environment, about the misuses of AI and all the sort of the harms and the deep fakes and the misinformation, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of bad news stories, floating around out in public conversation. So one of the jobs that these tech companies need to do, in addition to figuring out how to make money, is basically convince everybody that it's worth doing, that sure, there are going to be some short-term harms. I mean, I'm sure that OpenAI would even present the last week's accident in these terms. You're going to have accidents like that on the path to this magical technology, which is going to solve everything. And, trust us, it's going to be worth it. So I think a lot of the talk about AGI is serves that purpose. Basically, is convincing us that, stick with them, that it's all going to be all right in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in that piece you wrote in last year, you said more than anything else, talking about the AGI conversation, more than anything else, it gives us a free pass to be lazy. What are our conversations about things like AGI and the singularity distracting us from? And I guess instead of thinking about AI surpassing mankind, what are the real concerns people should have about its advancement?
It's like a magic wand when you think about it, that the world has a lot of things wrong with it. And the idea that we can sort all of that out just by building a technology that will basically do it for us, I think is a fundamentally lazy mission. I think it's something which is sort of quite ingrained in sort of engineering, or especially sort of computer science culture, where we can solve everything with software. And sure, software has done a hell of a lot for the world, but I think the current dream that we're being sold about AI and AGI sort of takes that idea that software is the answer and runs with it to a place that becomes problematic. And I think the more that the public buys into that and lawmakers buy into that, then I think that's not great for sort of the other sort of hard but realistic ways of solving many of the world's problems. Laws need to be made. Finances need to be allocated to solve these real world problems. And if you become convinced that actually the way to do that is by, backing AI companies, then I think we'll be in a bad place.
This has been really, really interesting, Will. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's all for today. I'm Aaron Wary. Talk to you tomorrow.